Hi class, Jolene here. All right, let's take a look how to add type to our project. And type in Photoshop is a little bit different than in Illustrator. So I've gotten out my character palette, and the way I got to that was I went to Window and Character, and then I've also gotten out my excuse me, my paragraph palette. Which is right here. And then I've pulled out my swatches palette so I have it nice and handy. Now, one thing I'm noticing here is that I don't have a whole lot of space to put the name of my event, the time, date, and location, which is what I need. So I'm going to do a little recoloring here to make an area that is big enough to put my type. So I'm going to choose my yellow here and my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to make this yellow. And I think this area will probably give me enough room. So I'm going to start with that. All right, now I'm going to look at my character palette here, and I'll stick with this font that I've chosen here. I've got it at 18 points right now. We can easily change that. But the leading, which is the space between lines, is way too small. It should be at least 18 points, which is what the font's going to be. So I'm going to change that to 18 right now. All right, and then I need to choose a different color because if I type yellow on yellow, of course, you won't see it. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to start with this blue color. Actually, no, I think I'll use this color. All right, so now we're going to get the type tool, and then I'm just going to click about right here, and it puts in the Lorem Ipsum type, and then you can just start typing. So mine is going to be called, my event is going to be Senior Class Picnic. All right, and that is, I can see right off the bat, 18 points. 19 points is too small. So I'm going to double click on this and increase the size to about, let's see how 30 looks. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to go over to my move tool and I'm going to move that type. And this is where our guides come in. In my case, I'm going to align my type along this guide. And so I don't want to go outside it, either on the top or on the side. So I'll leave it about right there. I just double clicked on it because I think I want to make it even bigger. So I've done that. Now I'm going to go back over to my move tool and I'm going to move it to about right there. Now I need my other information. So I'm going to go back to my type tool and then click again. So now I'm going to put in the time, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'll stay consistent and not use any dots. And I can already see this type is going to be too big, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going. I'll fix it later. Click enter. And let's see, we've got the time. We need the date. We'll do Sunday, March 1. I'm making this up. And then the location, I'll make Kennedy Park. All right, so see what's happening here is the leading is not enough. So I'm going to select this. It's only 18 and we need it to be at least 36. And that's actually maybe a little too big, but we'll see in a minute. Now I'm going to come over to my paragraph palette over here and ask it to right align the type. So now I will move this over and align it. And again, I think it's too big. So let's take this down to, let's see how, 24. That looks pretty good. And now maybe there's too much space in between. So I will maybe reduce that. And let's see now how this is going to fit. I'm going to reduce it even a little more so that it fits here. I'll try 18 is going to be too small, 24 is too big, so I'm just going to type in 20. There, that looks pretty good. But there's not enough contrast for this information. So I'm going to click here and see what happens if I change this to blue. Still not enough contrast, so I'm going to change it to black. That's a little bit stronger. Now, the font you choose will determine how strong it appears also. So I've used a rather fancy font for the title, but I think for the information part of it, maybe something a little more generic would be better. So let me see what I've got here. That's too big and bold. Let's see. Now that that looks pretty good. Impact is often a good font for something like this. Let's see. Since I know the name of it, which is not always the case, I'm just going to type that in. All right, now let's see how that looks. That's definitely nice and bold. This is the tricky part, making it fit. So I'm not thrilled with that. I'm going to change this to Myriad Pro Condensed, and I'll make it semi-bold. There we go. Now let's reduce the size. So as you can see, this is, you really just got to fool around with it. I'm going to make this even smaller now, maybe 16. There we go. Now it's fitting in there a little better. All right. So that's how you add type. Now you can see I went through the process of figuring out what font would work for this. And I kind of just did it on the fly. But I should see a bunch of different font choices here in your layers. So you could, maybe I'll make this a group. I'm going to do Control G, or you can go here to New Group. And I'll call this Type Trial 1. And now I'm going to turn that one off, and oops, I didn't get all of it in there. Let me turn that back on. I didn't get any of it in there. So I'm just going to drag that in there. All right, so now I can turn that off. Now I'm going to try something different. So I'll go back to my type tool, and let's find something different. Maybe we'll use this one for senior class picnic. I'll triple click on it or double click. Change the size. Now I'm seeing here that this black is working really well for the contrast. So that could be one of your choices, and then try something different for the rest of the information, and then group that and call that tile type 2. So as the directions tell us, we need 10 different type trials. And you can try placing it in different places. Oh, that's not going to work, not enough contrast. But what if I add something to make that pop more? So I'm going to try adding, so let's add a shape that's going to go underneath this type that will allow it to be better seen. So I'm going to go down here to the rectangle tool. And you can see up here that I've got my fill color here. Let's see, let me make sure. Yeah, I'll choose that one. And I want no stroke. And now I can click and drag my rectangle. And I didn't get it exactly in the right place. So if I do controller command T, oh, I actually accidentally made two of them. So let me delete that one. I'll do it in the layers. You can see I've got two of them there. I'll delete that one. And then on this one, I've selected controller command T. You can also go to edit and transform. And I'll just drag that out a little bit more. Okay, so I've got that there. And it's right now in my layers, it's above the type. So I'm going to drag it down so it's below. And ooh, now we can really see it. But it is also obscuring the design. So while I'm on this rectangle layer, I'm going to change the opacity to something about like that. So we can still see the design, but it has a lower opacity. And then we'll go back to this, and then you could put all the information right here. So I'm going to turn that off, maybe turn this back on. Maybe I'll grab this and drag it down in here. Now it's below the rectangle. I'm going to drag the rectangle all the way to the bottom here. And maybe I don't want this right aligned anymore. I want it center aligned. And the way you find center is, so this is 6 inches. So let's bring a guide out to 3 inches. There we go. Now we know exactly where center is. And let me turn that layer back on. Make sure you're on the layer in order to move it. And now the leading of this type, I'm going to nudge that type over a little bit using the arrows on my keyboard. Now this type is a little bit, the leading is too far apart. So I'm going to go back to that layer and change the leading to, let's see what 16 looks like. Oh, that's better. Now let's click off of that. Sometimes you just have to click on another layer to click off of it. I'm going to toggle my guides off so that I can see how this looks. So I'm going to hold down controller command semicolon. That toggles them off. To turn them back on, command or control semicolon again. Okay, I'm going to turn those off. There's the one up at the top. We don't need that. So we've got, these are the 2 layers we're working with. So I've selected them, and now I'm going to nudge that down, see how that looks. Okay, that's looking pretty good. But now we've got this dramatic white yellow up here, which I did deliberately because I was thinking maybe I was going to put the type there. Now I've changed my mind, so I'm going to change this, and so I'll go back and get my paint bucket tool, and I'll load it up with maybe one of these blues. Got to be on that layer in order for it to work. Actually, I think I'll try this. Yeah. So, so darker colors recede, they kind of go into the back, and lighter colors come forward. So I kind of like what's happening here because this light color is drawing my eye down to where the information is. And that's exactly what I want to happen. Now I'm going to go back to this rectangle and go back to the rectangle, and I'm going to try it with a different color instead of this orange. So I'm going to double click right here on that little icon, and it brings up the color picker, but I'm going to use my swatches because I want to get this exact color here, and let's see how that looks. I'm kind of liking the yellow because my eye is being drawn down here and then to a matching color. Now let's see what happens if we change the type color. Let's see, let me make sure I'm on the correct line. Yes, so now I need to select the type tool, and I'm going to double click on the type, and I'm going to try seeing what happens if I change it to this color. Okay, so now we're not getting as much contrast. So I'm going to double click on it again and see how this color looks. That's better, but it's still not popping very well. So now let's try a new thing. Let's try using special effects on this type. It's right down here on my character palette. I mean on my layers palette. And I'll just click on blending options and it opens up this. So let's start with trying a drop shadow on it. Well, right there, that helped pop it. Now, make sure to make adjustments to the drop shadow, you've got to click right on that layer. And so you can see I can increase the distance of the drop shadow, the size of it, which just makes it more blurry. And I just want something, just make it about like that. Maybe even 2. You can either slide it or type in the numbers. And then let's see what putting a stroke on it does. Okay, that stroke's not good, so it's a gradient. So we don't want a gradient in there. We're going to change this to color. And not digging that color because it's not in our palette. Let's try, see what happens if we put yellow around it. Now, that is too thick. So I'm going to change this to 1. And now we get kind of an interesting look because of this font was a kind of a grunge font. It puts the stroke on all the little pieces in there. Let's see, we could also try bevel and emboss, and there's lots of different choices here. You can change the contour of it. That's better right there because it makes it bolder. You can also change how the style of the embossing. You can change the technique. So maybe if I want to smooth that out a little bit. So there's a lot of fun things you can try in here, and I encourage you to do that. All right, let's see how this is looking now. We're looking at this at 50%. We can tell right here. So I'm going to increase the size of this until I get up to 100%. So that's what it would look like if you were holding this in your hand or looking at it hanging on a wall. And what I'm deciding is, I'm going to back out a little bit, that this type needs to be bigger. So I'm going to go back to that layer and I'm going to just drag it bigger. Now in Photoshop, when you drag, you don't have to hold down the Shift key. This is a new thing. It will keep it in proportion just by dragging. Okay, so I've dragged it. I like that size, but it's not centered, so I'm going to toggle my guides back on. So remember that is Control semicolon. And now I'm going to move that back to center. Yeah, I like that a lot better. But maybe I want to change that color again. So I'm going to go back and select my type tool. You can use the letter T, tap on the letter T, and let's try this color. Let's see how this looks. A little stronger. Yeah. So that's how you do type in Photoshop. One other thing, well, I'm going to do one other video to show you other things that you can do with this background. So I'll close this one off for now.